The question that I want to kick off with is big, it's broad, kind of like the show. What does genre mean to you?
Go ahead, Olivie.
Not much. Just kidding. No, as I was saying yesterday, for those of you who attended my talk with TJ that was obviously super regulated and had lots of rules, that I feel like being a genre writer means being part of this very storied history of being specifically in the genre of science fiction and fantasy, and feeling like my work is in constant conversation with the work that has come before me, with like the great epics of this genre. I also feel like the genre constraints, they're not too tight for me. They're like, you know, I can move. I'm good. And I think because I personally am influenced a lot by literary and romance, and I think the publishing term is upmarket, but you know, like the book club reads, that I think I've really driven to write the kind of books that I think of as like group chat reads, that like you want to talk to someone about it, which I really enjoy in this time of bookishness, where people get to do it collectively, because when I was a kid and I identified as a reader, that was something I very much did alone. So yeah.
Webster's Dictionary. Define genre. Can you imagine if I just...
Keep going.
I actually, you know, genre. What does it really just? It's a selection of expectations, which I think some can find stifling. But what I find exciting about writing in genre is once you understand those expectations, you can do the opposite. And I think it's very. It's nice to have this sort of. Kind of a guide of what you know your reader, your audience is going to kind of expect, and then and when you have that path there, then you can start to weaving in and out of it. I think it's a very that's why I get excited to play in genre personally. Is just you kind of have these little keys that you can either choose to turn or not, and sometimes just go through a completely different door. It's very exciting to me.
I think that the expectation of genre can sometimes be a little stifling. If you read a romance, you expect, what? A happy ending at the very end of the book. That's what's going to happen. I don't think that science fiction and fantasy per se have that same bit of stifling that goes along with it. But sometimes I think that my books aren't fantasy enough for fantasy people, and that my books aren't science fiction enough for science fiction people, because then I think, okay, I wrote a science fiction book, and one of the main characters is a vacuum cleaner with social anxiety. And his friend is a nursing machine who's a sociopath. And so, like, I love taking bits and pieces of quote-unquote genre and putting them together in different shapes. I think that helps me to be able to explore the ideas I want to, rather than being stuck in like a rigid form. You have to go this direction for this kind of thing.
My answer is pretty much going to be a combination of Mr. Tingle's and Olivie's, in that it's both a history and tradition that we're sort of following that come from the old epics like Gilgamesh, Mahabharata, the Odyssey and Iliad, which sort of cemented that genre fiction is the original. It's like the ur, or like the canopy of a tree, and everything else is sort of usually a distillation of it, because they weren't just kept to one thing. Like some of these epics also involve what might be giant space battles, depending on your interpretation. Mahabharata has the use of explosions in it, arrows that would detonate the mushroom cloud, like written in there, and you can interpret that how you want. Is that sci-fi or is that fantasy? Gilgamesh has very, very similar motifs and beats, and as time evolved, so my background is in comparative mythology and also story foundry, the history of how certain stories came to be. And there's a lot of evidence that a lot of these were distilled later into folk tales and fables. So microcosms of that same story that then got spread through religion and culture, Buddhism being one of the largest spread of stories in the world, actually, along the Silk Road. And then someone went, I want to take that and make it my culture. So they just fan-ficked another story. And we're still continuing that sort of tradition, and now we're in a time where a lot of different people from different backgrounds, LGBTQ and other cultures, can come in and now offer their lens and their history of like, here's how that story might have been from our perspective, or how it has been. And that's actually what my work is. It's a love letter continuing that tradition and showing it through more Asiatic cultures. And that genre is just that. It's us being in the story tradition and then getting to carry it on and comment on it.
So I purposely sat on the end so I could just be like, what they said. So I love the word expectation. I was actually talking with my friend earlier about the fact that the past 3 years I have read nothing but super fluffy romance, because that's all my anxiety can handle. So I love when the genres that you know what you're getting out of things, because I don't know if anybody else has had terrible anxiety the past couple of years. I don't know where that would have come from. So I love the comfort of picking up a book in a genre, knowing exactly what I'm getting, just so we know, like, there's going to be a happy ever after and everything's going to be okay.
I really like that the way that all of you talk about this has a big cross-pollination to it. It is something that is not rigid. I feel like certainly when I was growing up, the stuff that I was reading, it was really strict. It was like, okay, science fiction, it's got spaceships. Fantasy, it's got dragons. Romance, it's got Fabio. And there's sort of, I like that everything is changing right now, but I like also that it's like we all grew up in these pools and are now remixing stuff. And that's what I want to talk to you all about, because all of you have done, whether it is something like fan fiction or just diving out into the great unknown and self-publishing something, there's a lot of like, fuck it, we're gonna just do it.
Yeah, fuck it, we all.
Yeah, and I want to know about that from the writer's point of view. How many people in the room are writers, or would like to be writers?
Be
You
honest.
are.
Be honest, come on. Yeah. I haven't published a damn thing. I'm a writer. It is scary though, right? To be like, oh, am I a writer? Do I get to be a writer? And I like that all 5 of you, in this way, in this sort of like, fuck it, we've all way. Would you all like talk about how you do that?
Okay. Chuck, I was trying to get you to like soothe TJ because his leg was bouncing the whole stage. And so I was like, Chuck, could you just gently caress TJ's leg?
I was told to do
I was like, can you just like do that? And Chuck was like, what? And I was like, like this. And then I demonstrated to Chuck. In case you guys are wondering what I'm doing with my hands back here. And then Chuck was like,
I'm a homosexual, but she's my wife.
When we're on tour, I am TJ's wife. Okay, so, balls.
Remixing.
Yes. Okay, so I was a fan fiction writer for many years. Yes, I wrote a very mentally unhealthy 4 million words of Hermione fan fiction, which is not a fandom I engage in anymore. Yes, I know. TJ was trying to tell me that Herco was a better name. Okay. I did coin the ship name Not Pot, which is Theo Knott and Harry Potter, and I did that as a joke. But many people are like, why is this ship called that? It's so stupid, and it's called that because I decided to. Wow, this is gonna take I hope you guys are like, okay, jump in at any point. So I was a fan fiction writer for many years because my psychiatrist didn't refill my pills, and that's a true story. And I was awake for like 3 days, and I found fanfiction.net and made that everybody else's problem. And then I realized that, when we were talking about genre constraints, fanfiction is a very interesting and particular medium. Actually, writing fanfiction is a lot more similar to writing episodic television than it is to writing a book, because each chapter you write, what's great about fanfiction is that it's like a living work, that every time you write a chapter, people read it in real time and they are part of that story as it goes on in installments. But you have to shape it like a TV episode, because it's like, here's the beginning, here's the middle, here's how it contributes to the larger story, but we still give you something to come back for the next chapter, so you don't never disappear and never come back. So it was a really interesting process of what do people like? What does it take to please a crowd? What is interesting to people? And I think that I think that the interest in fan fiction is also what has driven publishing to do that sort of hybrid thing where a lot of different genres come together, because that's something that happens a lot in fan fiction. I wrote epic fantasy, I wrote contemporary romance, historical romance. I did all that in fan fiction. But it also has some rules of people expect you to not turn Hermione Granger into a psychopath. That's not fun for them. but it was really fun for me. So I started self-publishing books. I was like, you know what, okay, I'll write some books. My brain started to feel better when I was channeling it and doing creative work, and I was like, I think maybe this is what I'm supposed to be doing. I had dropped out of law school at that point, and yeah, so I started self-publishing. I didn't expect to make money off self-publishing at all. That wasn't the point. It was like to give it to my best friends on AO3 and like, let's not let this story die on a hard drive while I continue to try to be traditionally published. And I did get my first traditional publishing deal for my young adult romance, My Mechanical Romance. And then a year later, while I was giving birth, which is very boring for men, I get it. It's like 2 days of just like sitting there while your wife is, you know, busy. And my husband looked at my KDP sales and was like, something really weird is happening to the Atlas 6, which was my 9th self-published book. And so, yeah, that's why I'm here as Olivie Blake, why I have 2 careers, and why I write for teens under one name and adults under another. And it's very exciting, and I bucket with ball. Yeah, I do what I want.
So I currently, I have a traditional publishing deal with Tor and LitHub for horror novels, and I just signed another one for 4 more. But at the same time, I also still self-publish my erotica. Art is not static, it is constantly evolving. The way, I use Harry Potter as an example, clearly the way that we interact with that is very different than when it came out. And that is actually just the way that art functions. That's where all the beauty is. That's where these moments of conflict are. So whenever people start talking trash on fan fiction, I always just think like that is the art. It is not even an argument, is it valid? It is the art itself. And so if you ever are writing it, never denigrate yourself into thinking that you're not doing something truly powerful and important by participating in that.
The Atlas series, it exists in communion with fan fiction. Like I wrote it with the understanding that someone would write a fix-it fic, and that all the ships are legit. And anyway,
yes,
it exists from the understanding that you are meant to engage with this work. So.
Yes, I will also say that I met. I'll just throw something out there. I met before I met TJ. I was you kind of wrote fan fiction about me a little bit. That's kind of how we met. So it's a wonderful, beautiful thing.
So I wrote a book called How to Be a Normal Person, and that came out in 20...
Who would have thought that would be about?
Well, that was the book had a sequel called How to Be a Movie Star, in which there's a character that is based upon Chuck, and the book is dedicated to Chuck because I love Chuck.
Yes.
And
before we met, I found
before we met, he found that book and he tagged me and posted it. I'm like, Chuck Tingle knows who I am. And then like a few months later, my editor calls me. She goes, "Are you sitting down?" And I said, "Why?" And she goes, "Because Chuck Tingle has blurbed in the lives of puppets." He read the book early and blurbed it, and I cried. Because it's Chuck Tingle and Stephen King are like my things. And so you hear that. What was the fucking question? Yeah, it's fan fiction.
No, so we all engaged and you self-published for a while.
Oh, I see what you're talking about. Okay. So I was indie published with a small publisher that imploded at one point and was self-published, and then I got called up to the big leagues with The House in the Cerulean Sea. And so here's what I want to talk about. I'm not going to talk about fan fiction. They all said the good stuff about fan fiction. I guess I will say one thing about fan fiction. Look, you can denigrate it all you want. You can be the snobby literati about the whole entire thing. But think of it this way: this is how burgeoning writers learn how to write, when they don't have to focus on world building, they can focus on characterization. And 2, that's where young queer writers go to fix canon where they don't even see themselves again. So when you think about queer people and fan fiction, a different aspect of the writing thing, and that's people who do what we do and also do full-time jobs. There are people, most authors do not do this full-time. It's not financially feasible to do that full-time. To be an author who can live off the writing, it's very, very rare that actually happens. I was working for an insurance company whose lizard commercials you probably all know. And so when you get into a horrific car accident, if you killed someone, or you were severely injured, or you were getting sued because you killed someone, guess who you called? This guy. I was the one who answered the phone. And unfortunately, one day, back in 2012, or excuse me, back in 2015, one of the bigwigs of this company came to visit the office in Fredericksburg, Virginia, where I live. And I had to talk to them. My bosses asked me to be the one to talk to them and show them what we do. And this gentleman, this older white man, said the most devastating thing to an artist's soul that I have ever heard in my life. He said, "You are very good at insurance." If you have ever been told that in your life and you did not commit harikari, here's what happened. Here's what happened. I felt that down to my bones. I had been doing this for 10 years. It was my career. I was salaried. I had full health benefits. What I was also doing though was working 60 hours a week, coming home, writing until 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, and then getting up at 5 and doing it all over again. That's not healthy. That's not something you can survive on, but I did it because I wanted it that bad. And so after this bigwig came in, I had an honest conversation with myself. I said, do I want to walk away from this surety of a job so I can write full time? No, I'm not going to do that. That would be stupid. Literally 2 weeks later, I went into my work to go meet with my boss about a case that we were trying to settle, and he goes, "Okay, what do you have for me today?" And apropos of nothing, I accidentally said, "I think I quit." Just like that, as a question, and he looked at me, and I looked at him, and he looked at me, and then he said, "What?" And I said, "I think I quit." So what did I do? I attempted to give 2 weeks notice that turned into 2 months notice. But in February of 2016, I walked out of that office and I've never been back. I've never done that. But here's, I don't need to clap for that. Here's what I'm trying to say. Here's what I'm trying to say for that. Sometimes you do have to make sacrifices in order to get what you want. And not every road is going to be the same for everybody else. I was published from 2011. I published over 20 books by the time The House in Cerulean Sea came out. I worked my butt off. Olivie, she was writing and self-publishing It's when you hear those stories of the big authors, the big debut authors getting those $1 million contracts and their book comes out and they're being bought for TV and everybody's buying it, that rarely happens. And I wouldn't wish that on my own worst enemy to have another author go through that. If you think about Rebecca Yarros, who has The Fourth Wing, she has other books that she's written before that were not science fiction, that were not fantasy, but she worked her butt off, she paid her dues, and look what happened. One book that she had connected with the world on an overwhelming sense of scale. So please, if you want to be a writer, please don't think that you have to have your big book published the first book and it's going to be the big explosion. You don't want that. Build your back catalog. Take your time. Let things come to you. And then one day, when you're ready, go into your job and quit.
So I'm going to start with, because my story is kind of a mix of all three there so far, in that I struggle with ADHD and depression with suicidal ideation.
Yes, girl.
And with the background of being South Asian, I've got all the baggage and pressure of that too. So I come from a family that has routinely quitted streams for the societal and Asian cultural good. My father had a chance to be really big in Bollywood, and he was working his way up from like gangster number 3 in the background to like the second sidekick of a villain, and constantly working his way up, and he quit. My mother was one of the best artists at the time for traditional commercial art in India, and had the chance to work for Coca-Cola when they were first coming in, and she quit. My uncle had the chance to be a professional cricket star over there, and he quit because my grandfather told him to, or else. And growing up with the mental illness and then all the pressure, a lot of my life has been fuck it, we ball. Because as someone had to, I think the genes that give Asians their brains skipped me. Because I was only ever good at art and athletics, and I failed nearly every academic stuff except English. So I'm already kind of set up to be a writer. And by the time I turned 18, I had decided to pursue theater. And I got some really hard advice from somebody who complimented me, one of my acting coaches, but told me at the time there were only 2 Indian actors in America, Kal Penn and Kunal Nayyar, who had been cast in very specific roles. And he was like, do you want to play a terrorist on 24, or do you want to be comedic relief on The Big Bang Theory one day? And I was like, oh. So my immediate response is, fuck it, we do something else and we ball. And I've always loved writing in urban fantasy in particular because it is a mashup of genres like we discussed, of the noir and the contemporary fantastical elements. But in that, you can see people like me being represented because it was set today. So it was a natural place for me to gravitate to start writing my own stories, and my earliest stuff was kind of like Dresden Files, fanfic meets other stuff. And it got to a point where I started writing it in the hopes of traditional publishing, and I was told at that time, unless your last name is Butcher, Briggs, Cadger, Hearn, they're not buying you because the genre had been super saturated by the time I came along. Like, traditional publishing was done buying it. And that same month, Amazon had just gone, hey, we're starting this thing called self-publishing, like KDP. And I'd seen like the first authors breaking in. Amanda Hocking, who was writing her queer paranormal, I think, troll series at the time. It was like 2012. And I was like, okay, I can do this. And I self-published my first urban fantasy. And nothing came of it. And I was like, oh, maybe I really suck at this, and I should quit. And my depression got to a really bad point with life. Working in cars, which I do love, but I did not like the customers. Working in also building custom gaming computers, which I loved, and I did not like the place I worked, because it's probably the most horrible corporation in America for selling you computer parts, because they rip you off. And I had seen that Jim Butcher was coming to sign. And my depression was at the point where I was thinking of taking my life. And I was like, I'm gonna get this one good thing to happen for me in my life. I'm gonna get my favorite book signed by my favorite author, and I'll take myself out that night. And when I had gotten there, he asked me how I was doing, and I don't know why, but I told him where I was mentally. And he stopped the signing and told me that only I could kill my dream. And if I stuck with this, with writing, that one day I could possibly be where he was, doing a book signing, being on war ballots with him, maybe a bestseller list or an anthology with him. And obviously I didn't go through with that night. I took that to heart. And I published my second book 2 years later. And I had it with my job, so I did what TJ said you should not do. I walked up at lunch and told them, hey dog, I'm going to lunch and I'm not coming back. They thought I was joking, and I was not. I've not been back in the normal workforce since. I hope I can keep saying that. And a month later I found out booktube had placed for the Dragon Award with Jim Butcher. So one of the first things he told me that like I could do happened, and after that point, The Verge, which is like a giant tech and nerd article magazine, covered it. And it brought a lot of exposure to the series where it became just enough for me to keep going and self-publishing. And I reached a point where I wanted to start experimenting, which I didn't realize at the time was kind of hard for an indie author. If you weren't really big and established, like, it's a hard risk. So I changed genres, and things sort of tanked again. And then I changed genres again, trying to fix that. And I wrote something that somebody told me to want to dare, but I wasn't happy with it. But it made me a ridiculous amount of money in a short time. And my response to that was actually, fuck that, we ball on something else, because it actually made me really upset, because it wasn't what I wanted to write. And my immediate response was writing the first book in this series, which was like, I'm gonna nerd out for me, I'm gonna write something about oral storytelling, and I was gonna serialize it back to kind of like the fan fiction idea and weekly, because I wanted the input. And it was written like the old radio plays, because my acting background, I loved the idea of performing for people, and it was written with the lens of a storyteller actually performing for the audience. So it was written in conversation with Audible, who was going to buy it first. And we're like, can we do this weekly? And then I met someone who was drunk at DragonCon, talking to while I was talking to a tabletop editor, and he happened to be my original Tor editor, who overheard the conversation of what this book was supposed to be about. And then he's like, send this to me. And I had no idea who he was, and I'm like, why? Because he's hungover. And then he's like, well, I work at Tor, and if I like it, we might buy it. And I didn't think anything would happen. And 2 months later, just before Christmas, I get a phone call going, yeah, we want to buy the books, who's your agent? And I was like, I don't have one. He's like, go find one and call him back to me. And here we are.
I'm regretting being the caboose now, because I have to follow. I was tearing up. Yeah, so this is my first adult book. All of my other, this is my 11th book. All the other 10 books were for teens. And when I knew I was going to go into this genre and move out of teen, I wanted to kind of give myself permission to get really weird. Because all of my other teen books were really serious high fantasy books and had really played by the rules of high fantasy and adhered to all the structure. And the reason I got into writing and the reason I love storytelling was not necessarily because of those structures and because of those rules. I liked things that are a little bizarre and a little quirky. And so I wanted to give myself permission, like I said, to get out of that. And what was kind of became my version of fan fiction was watching TTRPGs, Did you mention 20s? I knew I would get a reaction from you guys. Thank you. Specifically, The Crown of Candy. I watched that so many times because the way that really the way that all of them do, they take themselves so seriously, even as they're like there's one character who's literally a bottle of milk, but like they take it so seriously that like you're tearing out because of this bottle of milk and what happens to this bottle of milk. So I just love that permission of like, you can do these things that are weird and genre bending and don't make sense as long as you take yourself seriously, give yourself permission, and really you're the only one who's in control of it because like there's no boss in this job, there's nobody like telling you what you really can and can't do, like your editor and your agent, but like outside of that it's just you in your office doing what you can. So it's really nice to find something that kind of encourages you and gives you that line of like, that little voice in the back of your head going, it's okay, you can do this, you can get through this. You know, that path to follow, which for a lot of people is fan fiction, but for me it was this silly little role-playing game where there's a bottle of milk and people cry.
Earlier today, I was on the train down and I was texting with a friend of mine, Christopher Hermlin, who hosts the podcast So Many Damn Books, and we were talking about literary fiction versus genre fiction. And a thing that started bubbling up, I promised I was going to describe a meme. We were talking about literary fiction a little bit like the Sickos meme. You know what I mean? It's somebody outside looking and being like, yeah, yeah. But there's something sort of between that person and the thing. Whereas genre writing, and I'm thinking very much about everybody who's on this stage, and frankly everybody that Tor publishes, there's an honesty, there's an exuberance, there's a presence. And I think it is because of the way that all of you interact with feelings. And Sara, I'm starting with you.
No, true.
I want to hear all of you talk a little bit about writing feelings. Like, all of you have made me laugh.
Here's the secret about the trauma dump, the fuck off.
I will say, when I interviewed TJ, there's like half an hour of that episode that got cut out because both of us kind of started crying, and then after the interview, I was sitting in my office and I was just like, that was so beautiful. But putting the honesty of feelings onto the page and sort of doing it, actually just doing it. Like, it feels like it fits into the unintentional theme of this panel, which is turning out to be fuck it, we ball. But putting feelings onto the page and not being afraid of them, I guess, is the thing. I feel like all of you do that, but in different ways. And Sara, I want to start with you because that book is hot as hell.
Thank you. So when I started writing this book, so this book is about the son of Santa who falls for the Halloween pranks because fuck it, we ball. And when I had that concept and I was going to go for it and gave myself permission to just be weird, I knew I wanted this book to just make people happy. I wanted it to bring joy to people because I started writing in 2022, and at that point I was tired of being sad. I was tired of everybody I knew feeling sad, and there was so much that I couldn't fix or couldn't do anything about, but I could make a book full of silly little Christmas jokes and Christmas holiday a little bit. And so that's what I did. Every decision I made for this book, every scene, every chapter, every character was always went back to the idea of joy and the concept of joy. Like, how do we make joy? Where does it come from? Is it sustainable? Like, is Christmas really something that is worth getting happy about? It's like all these things. Yeah, that's just what I wanted at the end of the day, is to have something that just gave us permission to be happy. Because that's the thing too. Like, there's so much bad happening that oftentimes don't feel like we can feel happy. That like feeling happy is a disservice to everything bad happening. But I feel like it's drastically the opposite. Feeling happy and feeling joy and finding those moments are the things that help sustain us in the face of all these other terrible things. So that was my feeling that I'm hoping to get across with this book. It's just like, to make you giggle a little bit.
For me, I definitely wrote this as a vibes over plot book. While there is a structure, a lot of it is about not just the love of storytelling, but the idea that everybody has a story. There's a beautiful quote by Dostoevsky that I love, and it goes, how could you have no story to tell because you have lived? And the idea that everybody who's lived a life has a story, even if you don't think you do. You genuinely do, and it's probably beautiful. There's someone out there who wants to listen to it and will cherish it, and you deserve to have that story heard. And the opening, book one actually opens that way, where the protagonist, who's a traveling storyteller, and is very coded as ADHD and depressed, because I was probably projecting. After he's done showboating, audition for essentially room and board to perform in, he immediately deflates and he asks the tavern keeper for the story of his life. He immediately moves it about himself and he's like, I don't want to talk about me, can we talk about you? Like, why did you build this place? Why does like that bar counter mean so much to you? Because he's polishing it nonstop. And it becomes this little loving story about this guy and his wife and how they built this place, and she never got to see it come to fruition. And the whole story is about that even through this epic journey that this legendary character's life was made because of the stories of all the other people, and they don't get that credit. So when he tells it back to you in the past, he's narrating it to a singer he's falling in love with. You get to see all the little people who normally make legends but don't ever get the credit for it, like how they interacted with him, from whether it's a kind person who took him in when he was homeless after he lost his home in fire, or somebody who might have abused him and what that trauma did to him. And there's also a lot of neurodivergent characters who discuss their feelings in there. Some openly, some not. There's a character who, if anyone here's familiar with Slash, the guitar player, a lot of times you might see him air picking at nothing, or if he has a guitar with him, he's still picking at it while he's narrating, and it's because he's got certain levels of performance anxiety, and his guitar is kind of actually what soothes him. And I coded that into a character who plays a mandolin, and he actually communicates it at times. When he's nonverbal, the protagonist will actually interpret some of the notes he'll play, and it's written in italics as this is what he's really saying. So this whole book was mostly written about the idea of, I guess, following like an emotional catharsis the way romance would do. It's not necessarily about the big action, but about the epic moments in lives and the feelings that resonate with it that might make you do something epic. But what's important is how you get there, the person you become, and the people that are a part of that to make you get there.
Okay, so now for something completely different. So they're talking about joy and hope and everything. You would think, oh, now it's TJ Klune's turn. He's probably going to talk about the same thing because that's what he does. Nope. So I want you to imagine it is the 1990s and you are on watching the news and you hear stuff about like David Koresh in Waco, and you hear stuff about that. But my favorite thing about the 90s, the weirdest thing about the 90s, was this little tiny group called Heaven's Gate. And the leader of their group, Marshall Applewhite.
I said this yesterday, I did a report on this cult, and so I am so into it.
Yeah. So listen, this cult in the 90s, which by the way, their website still exists and there are still members of the cult still exist. How do I know this? Because I talked to them. But Heaven's Gate, if you need a refresher, believe that there was a spaceship, an alien craft in the tail of the Halley Comet. And what we were going to do when the comet came was they were going to ascend. And how were they going to ascend? By killing themselves and off and everything. Marshall Applewhite was technically the one that killed off his followers and everything like that. The cult mentality has always been fascinating to me. And so I thought to myself a few years back, what if I wanted to write a queer action thriller where everything, there's like black helicopters and evil government and scary things are going on, but there's still gay sex. That's what most action movies need now. Gay sex to make them better. Like I am very anti Michael Bay because he should not be given money for anything anymore. After what he did for the Transformers. But at the same time, when you watch Transformers, I dare all of you to go home and watch Transformers and think to yourself, now would this be better with gay sex? I would posit that yes. So what I wanted to do with this book and my feelings was So I want you to imagine it's 2015 and you have this idea in your head. You want to write the trope of a group of children in an adult novel come together to fight evil. Think Stephen King's It. Think Robert McCammon's Boy's Life. Think, all of that kind of trope. So here's what I wanted to do. I wanted to write a book about a group of boys who came together to protect a little girl who was something special, something different, ordinary, in this very small town. And so I began to start writing that, and then all of a sudden this thing in 2016 called Stranger Things came out, and I was like, screw all of you! So then I thought, how can I go about this differently? What thing can I pull from to make this the book that I want to be? So here's your feelings. Are you ready? I'm going to give you a two-word, three-letter descriptor of it, depending on how you look at the second word. This book, The Bones Beneath My Skin, which comes out in February of next year, is Sexy E.T.
I will say, a lesser author might say, well, how the heck can I follow that? But I've written about 400 books about sex and I will also say that was actually very loving and joyful. You set that up like it wouldn't be, but it actually came out bringing me a lot of joy. As far as like expressing your feelings through art, I have a huge advantage. I'm wearing a mask. That actually makes it really easy to express yourself. I mean, I wear this. If buckaroos don't know, I'm on the autism spectrum. We got any autistic buckaroos in the crowd? There you go. So I found that masking, my neurotypical masking, was giving me a lot of stress. It was giving me chronic pain, and that as I express myself through this mask, through this pen name, it actually relieved my pain, and it's been a conduit for me to really find some interesting things about myself. I think it's Oscar Wilde said, if you want a man to tell you the truth, give him a mask. So I do have that advantage, but I will say that as humans, we are all creators, whether or not, I know there were some writers in the audience up front, but there's also acting and music, all these other things. But on top of that, there is, honestly, everything is an act of creation. If you're forming a sentence, you're creating something. If you're going for a walk, if you're making a sandwich for your young buckaroos and sending them off to school, those are all valid forms of creation. Fan fiction, very valid form of creation. But we are all creating at all times, and creation is a place for us to express these feelings, some of them conscious and some of them subconscious. And so I would encourage everyone, when it comes to kind of learning about yourself, look to what you create, and do not just define that by a painting or a book or a song. See what you're creating in your day, and you wield that power however you would like. I like to wield it to prove love. Love is real, is written on my forehead. Wield it how you see fit, and I think you will be amazed at how powerful you are, and what you can do to this timeline with the power of your own creation and the feelings that fuel that.
Can I build on that real quick? Because that was beautifully said. And for any etymology and language nerds here, does anyone know the old word for like a book of spells? Grimoire? That is actually the Old English word for grammar. So a book of magic historically has always been a book of spelling, a book of writing. The very act of writing and speaking historically is intrinsically tied to magic and creating your own reality, if you want to look at it through that lens. So, and with Love is Real, like on his hat, it's quite literally him speaking that and it's no different to any good kind word you say or do for anybody else. Historically, that is magic.
You are all under my spell.
The next time you make a sandwich, go, I'm a creator!
Yeah, I think that the way we engage with art is also very important, and that I think there has been a little bit of a, I brought this up yesterday. Also, where was the gay sex energy yesterday? I feel like I brought up sex many times and you're like, ew.
I'm asexual, I'm allowed to be. I'm allowed to contain multitudes.
Okay. Well,
Last panel we were on got like this.
I did that. And this time TJ did it. Okay. I specifically, you can't see, but this shirt has many tasteful nudes on it, and I wore it for Chuck Tingle. So I don't know what. Okay, we were talking. You started talking about literary and genre and.
Genre's a place for feeling.
Yes, yeah, and I think genre is like, a lot of times it's doing something that is adjacent to literary, but like with camp, like it's doing it with a wink. And I like to lean into that feeling of camp. And sometimes I'll read a book that is literary, but is very much, it definitely like could have been horror or could have been something else. And I'm like, actually this might be better if it had a horror editor or a fantasy editor, because they would ask questions that are important, like why does this work? Anyway, I won't name names, but I think that there's a really interesting. I don't know. Actually, maybe we should just move on. I was just kind of processing everything everything that was already said. I mean, I love feelings. I think that but I don't love my feelings. Like, are there any astrology girlies in the room? I like 12% believe what I'm saying, but also 100% at the same time. So I don't have any water sign placements. I'm like functionally a psychopath. So if I'm going to experience a feeling, I have to do it through media, and so that I think is why I love books that just slice me open. You know, like I love a book that's going to just completely rewrite me top to bottom. That's the kind of reading experience I'm looking for. I talked earlier about safe reading experiences, which to me, the romance genre, I respect it so much. I respect those rules. I think those rules are important. They should not be changed because you should know, the reader should know going in they get their happy ending. But I don't want to feel safe while I'm reading a book, and I don't want my readers to feel safe either. You're coming with me, and we're gonna feel things, and it's gonna be gross, and yeah, and I don't know, that's it. And yeah, and I think because I wanted to, I keep bringing up that I think it's important that we not keep saying things about like how much sex is appropriate in media. I think that we should not be making judgments about what is appropriate or not, because we are not content creators making content for you to decide is good or bad. We're artists, we're making art. You can engage with that art, or you don't have to. You're invited to put the book down if it doesn't have content that you like. But that doesn't change the fact that what we're doing is important, that it is art, that it is meant to be interrogated and to be engaged with.
Ooh. Alright, we only have a couple of minutes, and so instead of like having one question and having all of you do sort of a battle royale for that, we're gonna do a lightning round, but you are all invited to participate by raising your hands, okay? So, everybody, would you rather be kidnapped by real pirates or space pirates? Real pirates?
Real pirates.
Real pirates?
Space pirates are real pirates, they're just in a different location.
You know what, that's on me, that's fair. Would you rather be transported 10,000 years into the past or 10,000 years into the future? Past? Well, only a couple people. Future?
That's your
If you go back, hey everybody, if you go back 10,000 years, that's when everybody stinks. And so, I don't know if you know this thing called deodorant, it really is cool.
Bring stuff back with us? Yeah. So, like, you bring like a lighter back and be like, we're gods now.
Yeah. Well, okay, we got fire, we know that much.
But can I just bring back like economics to that?
Okay.
Why would you bring them? You're gonna bring them capitalism? You're a fucking criminal.
Maybe we should early enough. It'll stop suddenly.
Jail.
Okay, dungeons or dragons? Dungeons? Dragons? Both?
Unfortunately, I did an event with Chuck a few months ago, and it turned out that I might be like tangentially a furry. But it's a thing where, what's it called?
Tangentially.
TJ is officially a scaly. You know
Yeah, because it's not my fault that Godzilla's attractive.
TJ is also attracted to Bigfoot. This is not tangential. And I was thinking that I meant.
Hey,
I'm like Drew.
at this time.
No,
Think about the panel. There could be more than one person on this panel attracted to Bigfoot.
I know, but we're bullying TJ right now. Not about Bigfoot. Just say you're not being upfront about your interests. You know?
Not my fault.
I also-
men are good.
I also needed to tell you to read Patricia Wants to Cuddle.
Yes.
It's Bigfoot meets The Bachelor. Yeah, it's very good. Drew says it's good.
It's very good, and I'm a bookseller. I want to see some maybe not slash fic, but like some fanfic about everything we were just talking about coming out of all of you. I look forward to talking to some of you about it in the future, whatever you might be writing. Can we get a big round of applause for that?